Hi folks, welcome back to my little shop. A client of mine has given me this 33 by 19 inch wide piece of solid white pine. And my job over the next few days is to turn this into a very simple country or Amish style table where this makes up the top. So before we get into it, let's take a closer look at what we have to work with.
So when I say solid wood, I mean this isn't even an edge glued piece. It's cut out of the log fairly close to the heart, so as you can see the edges are almost quarter sawn, which I think offers it a lot of stability. It's been in my shop for about 9 months now, and it hasn't moved at all. It's remained flat. On one side you can see the cathedral grain is kind of emerging from the surface, and it's split there in a few places. But the other side is really nice with some really lovely beauty marks, and I think with some careful sanding I can even out the patina and get rid of some of the paint rings. So I'll take the measurements of this piece and use it for the starting point for my design work. So for this project, of course, we're starting with a fixed thing that we can't really change, and that's the dimensions of the table. And the proportions and scale have to be all right. So I'm using SketchUp just because it's easy to kind of modify things. And I started really with the overhang. I just wanted to make sure, because that's one important aspect of scale. So I just kind of drew a rectangle on the bottom of the table just to get a sense of what overhang worked first, and then I tried adding some legs. And though we're looking for a very simple style, I didn't really like the square legs. It looked a little bit too bulky. I liked the size of them at the top, but straight down like that just looked too bulky. So of course I tapered them, and that looked a lot better to my eye. Now the aprons themselves, of course, it didn't really matter too much, within reason, of course, what thickness they were, but they had to be the right depth, and I played with those for some time and settled on that, which I think is about, if I remember, is about 3.5 inches or so. And of course, as somebody does some timber framing, I couldn't resist adding pegs to the tenons, which is a fun little thing to do, but is also historically accurate. So it's a very simple little table, but I think it will be appropriate in this sort of simple mid-1800s house. The top is, of course, quite a bit darker than any new pine would be. I talked with the client about trying to stain the new pine that I'll be machining and milling up for the undercarriage of the table, and she actually decided that she really liked the color contrast difference between the two of them, so we're going to leave it like that and see how it looks. At this point, I used the model to generate a draft cut list and headed out to my own little lumberyard. We live in a rural property, and I've become known around the community as the guy who will buy the odd log or the odd tree to save it from the firewood pile if it's too nice to be used for that. And as a result, I've got a decent collection of material for simple projects like this. But I've also got some nicer material for more refined projects. I have a fairly decent collection now of maple, oak, ash, cherry, and walnut. When I'm working in the small shop, I really like to rough my material out outside. It makes it a lot more manageable once it's inside my tiny little shop. I really enjoy the challenge of trying to make the most out of the material and reduce waste. So you see me here picking out the various components of the project while avoiding the knots. It's my opinion the bandsaw is one of the most underutilized and appreciated tools in the shop. On top of curves and resawing, I use it for roughing out material. It's safer, it's quieter, and it's a lot faster than a table saw. At this point, you don't need the accuracy that a table saw can bring. Around our place anyway, wood scraps are a blessing and absolutely nothing goes to waste. So from here, I don't jump right to final dimensioning. I want to get a sense of how stable the wood is. So I'll joint and plane everything oversized. The reason I bother jointing and planing at this stage is because it gives me known reference planes and dimensions. So if it moves, it's easier to tell how much and in what direction it moves. Now this is all lumber that I cut and milled and seasoned myself, so I know it was done properly, but it's still a worthwhile step in my opinion. If you end up with some lively wood, you want to know about it now so you can reject it. I'll stack the oversized components somewhere out of the way in a manner that lets air circulate around them so they can move and react if they're inclined to. I'll let them sit and do their thing at least overnight. After letting the rough stock sit for a while, I mill everything down to final size and cut it to length. The process, of course, is relatively straightforward, not terribly interesting, but I did show a picture of a deflector wedge on my Instagram at one point, and people were very interested and thought it was kind of a novel idea, so I thought I'd show that in action. As you can see, it simply deflects the cutoffs away from the back of the blade, where otherwise it could be lifted up and thrown. It just means you don't have to stop and remove the little cutoff every time. Mine has two rare earth magnets that are in the bottom to hold it in place, and when I'm not using it, it sticks to the side of the saw out of the way. As one final check, I lay all the stocks side by side just to make sure the milling is all uniform. I make sure to mill up some extra components to use as test pieces later on when setting up the machines. Doing this at the same time as the project pieces makes sure the dimensions are exactly the same. It's an opportunity to make good use of aesthetically inferior wood that's otherwise good. Join me in the next video where the sawdust really starts to fly. I use the big Wadkin chain chisel mortiser on the legs of our table, and I also attach the sliding table attachment to the big shaper. And I'll show you how I use a flush mounted cutter block from Whitehill Tools to mill the tenons on the end of our rails.